Welcome to our study on the Maccabean period. I'd like to begin by asking a question, mainly of you Filipinos. If you're from another country, I think you'll be able to make the translation for your own context. But if Philippine independence did not occur in 1896, how would the Philippines be different today? Take a moment and think about that. Well, I think you might conclude some things like, well, maybe a lot of us would still be speaking Spanish today. Or maybe some of us or more of us would be eating empanadas today. But I think you can perceive how things would be different had that independence not been gained. And it was the same for the Jews who won their independence over the Greeks. It changed many things in Israel. Now, there was actually three stages in that struggle for independence. The first stage was religious independence. And at the beginning, there was great unity among the Jews about restoring their freedom to worship. They were all together and of one mind. They all wanted this. And they were able to achieve that in 164 BC. The second stage in their development of their freedom was political independence. And the Jews gained the right to govern themselves without Greek resistance in 141 BC. And then the third stage was national independence. This is where they conquered the entire land of Israel. The same borders pretty much as the glory days of David and Solomon. And they were able to achieve that in 76 BC. So let's take a look at an overview of this period, the Maccabean period. What was accomplished? What were some of the developments in this period? Well, a major development was a faithful remnant. We see when we open up the pages of Matthew in the New Testament that there are still faithful Jews. They're still Jewish. They're not all Greek. And so God preserved his remnant because of or through the Maccabean period. Secondly, there was a strong messianic hope. Years of being under the persecution of the Greeks, the Jews longed for freedom, longed for being able to govern themselves, and then later, under the yoke of the Romans, they longed to have some type of Messiah to deliver them. The borders were extended during this period, all the way out to the same borders of the days of David and Solomon. You can see here in this map how things expanded, and we'll be looking at that a little bit later. There was also the Feast of Dedication, or Hanukkah, that started in this period, in this intertestamental period. The Feast of Dedication is not an Old Testament feast. It started in this period, and we'll take a look at that and how that was a significant development in this period. And this is the menorah. They had to have enough oil to keep the lamps burning. And the temple was cleansed during that time. Well, the next development was the line of the priesthood changed from Aaronic to Hasmonean. And that was a major change. Some people weren't too happy with that change. They thought that the leaders, the Jewish leaders, were becoming too Hellenized. They were taking on the ways of the Greeks. The Pharisees were the most influential group at this time. We see Judaism splintering into various factions, the Pharisees being one of them. But the Sadducees, another religious party, was gaining influence during this time period. And lastly, the Qumran community was founded. These people pretty much got fed up with corruption in the religious system in Jerusalem, moved down to the shore of the Dead Sea. And we know about that community. They're famous because they're the ones who hid the Dead Sea Scrolls. And this is the foundations at Qumran from that community that hid the Dead Sea Scrolls. Well, persecution had come to a head under this ruler, Antiochus IV. Early on, things weren't too bad under the Greeks, but under Antiochus, life became intolerable. And he persecuted the Jews to the point of death. It was now against the law. It was prohibited to be Jewish or to do any of the Jewish practices. It was illegal to have a copy of the Old Testament. Circumcision was outlawed. All these things under penalty of death. So life was just becoming intolerable for the Jews. Antiochus had built altars throughout Israel. These were dedicated to the Greek deities. And one day, a priest at the location of Modi'in, which is a little bit northwest of Jerusalem, his name was Mattathias. He was a priest, and he was pretty much being forced to perform a sacrifice to the Greek gods, and he just decided he couldn't do this anymore. Anger was welling up within him, and so he killed one of the Greek officials there. Well, Mattathias and those with him decided to run for their lives because they knew there would be retaliation from the Greeks, and indeed there was. The Seleucids killed 1,000 Jews in Jerusalem on the Sabbath day. As you know, during this time period, the Jews would not fight back on the Sabbath day, and this was the beginning of the Jewish revolt, called the Maccabean revolt. And so it's from a family that descended from this priest, Mattathias, and his sons, grandsons, and great-grandsons carried on the revolt, the resistance against the Greeks, generation after generation. Well, in the early days, the Jews had control only over a very small area of Judea, as you can see in this map, indicated by the green color. After Mattathias died, his son Judas took over. Now, Judas is called Maccabeus in 1 Maccabees 2:4, and scholars have debated what's the derivation of Maccabeus. It's thought to be maybe the hammerer, or the eradicator, or the hammerhead. And so this is how Judas was described, Judas the Hammer. And he was pretty shrewd. He made an alliance with the Romans, and because of this, he was able to have success in his resistance against the Greeks. Now, we see in this image in 270 BC that Rome was still pretty small at that time, just covering the area of modern-day Italy. But then by 192 BC, we see Rome has grown much larger, and they're able to put pressure on the Ptolemaic and Seleucid kingdoms. The second reason why Judas was able to have success is because of the decline of the Seleucid Empire at this time. They were fighting battles over in Media and Parthia, and this was draining them financially. It was draining them in terms of manpower. They were focused on that far eastern part of the empire, and so they couldn't concentrate as much of their efforts over in Israel with the revolt going on there. So this worked to Judas's advantage. Judas was able to capture Jerusalem in 164, and with that, they were able to gain religious independence because now they were able to regain the temple, to cleanse it. from the abominations that the Greeks had done, like offering a pig on the altar and dedicating the temple to the god Zeus. And so the temple was cleansed and sacrifices were able to be resumed. And it was during this time, the struggle to regain the temple, that the Feast of Hanukkah, or dedication, the word Hanukkah does mean dedication, came into being. And so in the struggle, the lamps of the menorah needed oil to keep burning. And the struggle lasted for 8 days. And the story was there wasn't enough oil to keep it burning. But God miraculously provided enough oil so that the menorah kept burning in the temple. And this is where the celebration of Hanukkah comes today and why it's 8 days long. The festival of dedication was mentioned in the New Testament. Jesus went up to this feast. It's mentioned in the Gospel of John. But this feast came about during the intertestamental period, during the Maccabean period. It was not an Old Testament feast. Well, after Judas, another son of Mattathias took over. His name was Jonathan. When Alchemist, the high priest, died in 160, there was no one qualified to take his place. So they raised up Jonathan to take his place. So this was the first time since the days of the judges that civil, religious, and military power was combined in one person. These were all combined in one person. And some of the Jews feared that. They feared this was giving one person too much power. Well, we see that Jonathan was able to conquer some new territory as indicated on our map in blue. So the borders are expanding. Simon took over after Jonathan in 142. Simon had a number of accomplishments that he was able to achieve. Through an alliance with Syria, Simon became the ruler of Judea. So he's making alliances even with the Greeks. The Jews were freed from having to pay taxes or tribute to Syria. That was a major accomplishment. The Syrian soldiers were removed from the Acra, a fortress in Jerusalem, in 141. So this marked the beginning of political independence. Now, without fear of retaliation by the Greeks in a military way, the Jews were free to govern themselves. So this was a very important development. In 140, Simon was raised up as the leader, high priest, and governor forever until a trustworthy prophet should arise, according to 1 Maccabees. But Simon wasn't of the line of Zadok, that is, a priest, nor was he a descendant of David, the kingly line. Therefore, many Jews weren't happy with Hasmonean leadership. And it's possible, because of this dissatisfaction, some of the Jews moved down to the shore of the Dead Sea and settled at a place called Qumran. They had it with the corruption in the religious system up in Jerusalem, and they founded their own community there. And we know that community as those who hid away the Dead Sea Scrolls. Qumran is located not far, about 20-25 kilometers to the east of Jerusalem. Scribes there made copies of many of our Old Testament books, and one of the best copies is the Isaiah scroll.